I knew something was wrong the second I turned my truck off the county road and onto the gravel lane that leads up to my place. It wasn't a sound. It was too quiet for that. And it wasn't anything I saw immediately. It was the horses. My two geldings, Rusty and Bo, usually stand near the trough this time of day, heads down, tails flicking away flies, completely unbothered by the world. But today, they were pacing near the far side of the corral, heads high, ears pinned back, staring at the eastern property line like a pack of wolves had just moved in. I rolled the window down, letting the dust settle, and that's when I saw it. Or rather, that's when I saw what wasn't there. For 60 years, a split-rail cedar fence had marked the boundary between my 80 acres and the rest of the world. My dad built it when I was just tall enough to hand him the nails. It wasn't pretty in the way a magazine cover is pretty. It was weathered, grayed by decades of Montana sun, leaning a little in places where the frost had heaved the ground, but it was strong. It was ours. And now it was gone. I don't mean it was broken. I mean it was erased. A stretch of about 200 yards, the entire section that bordered the new shining jewel of the county, the Oak Ridge Estates, had been dozed flat. My posts, those hand-hewn cedar logs my dad had sunk deep into the clay, were ripped out and stacked in a jagged, careless pile on my side of the dirt, treated like garbage. And sticking out of the ground, right where the corner post used to be, fluttering in the breeze like a little flag of conquest, was a laminated sheet of paper. I put the truck in park, my boots hitting the dirt with a heavy thud, and walked over to it. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just felt this cold, heavy weight settle in my gut, the kind of feeling you get when you realize someone hasn't just disrespected you. They've completely dismissed your existence. I ripped the paper off the stake. It was an official violation notice from the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association, printed on heavy stock, bright red letters at the top, in compliance. The existing structure does not meet community aesthetic guidelines regarding rustic barriers. Removal authorized by the Board for the Preservation of Visual Harmony. I stood there, wind whipping the paper in my hand, staring at the tire tracks of a skid steer that had churned up my pasture, leaving deep, ugly ruts in the soil my family had stewarded for 3 generations. The problem, you see, isn't just that they tore down my fence. The problem is, I don't live in Oak Ridge Estates. I never signed their covenants. I don't pay their dues. I am the ghost at their feast, the stubborn remnant of what this land used to be before they paved paradise and put up a pickleball court. And they had just decided that their rules applied to my dirt. But here's the thing about arrogance. It blinds you. It makes you look at the horizon and think you own the sun. What the HOA board, and specifically their president, a woman named Patricia Vance, didn't know, what they never bothered to check in their rush to sanitize their view, was that the very lifeblood of their perfect little community, the water that filled their Olympic-sized pool and kept their clubhouse lawns emerald green, didn't come from the city. It came from a well that sat squarely, legally, and undeniably on my land. They had just declared war on the guy with his hand on the tap. Before the subdivisions and the gate codes, this whole area was ranch land. When the developers first came sniffing around 10 years ago, slick suits and shiny brochures in hand, they hit a snag. The city water main stopped 2 miles short of where they wanted to build their clubhouse. To trench that pipe would have cost them a fortune they didn't want to spend. My dad, God rest his soul, was a handshake kind of guy. He made a deal with them. They could tie into our high-capacity agricultural well, an absolute beast of a system that tapped into a deep aquifer to feed their clubhouse and pool. In exchange, they'd maintain the access road and, importantly, leave us the hell alone. There was no formal contract, just a gentleman's agreement and a shared pipe. But gentlemen are in short supply these days, and my dad has been gone for 5 years. I walked back to the truck, the laminated notice crunched in my fist. I didn't go inside to call a lawyer. I didn't drive over to the clubhouse to scream. I just went about my evening chores. I fed the horses, checked the water troughs, and fixed a loose hinge on the barn door. But my mind was working, grinding away like a millstone. See, I'd had run-ins with Patricia Vance before. She was the type of person who thought neighborly meant obedient. She'd sent letters before. Complaints about the smell of manure on a ranch. Imagine that. Complaints about my truck being parked in view of the walking trail. Complaints that my grass was unruly. I ignored them all. I figured she was just noise, like the crickets in August. Annoying, but harmless. Bulldozing my fence wasn't noise. That was an invasion. The next morning, I drove out to the contractor's yard. The name was on a sticker left on one of the pulled posts. It was a local outfit, heavy machinery, and guys in neon vests moving with that slow, early morning rhythm. I found the foreman leaning against a dump truck, sipping coffee. I held up the laminated sign. "You guys do a job at Oak Ridge yesterday?" I asked, keeping my voice low and even. The guy squinted at me. "Yeah, cleared out some old fencing." "What?" "That was my fence," I said. "On my land." He straightened up, the coffee cup pausing halfway to his mouth. "Whoa, hold on." The work order came from the HOA. Lady named Vance. Said it was community property that needed remediation. We got a signed authorization. "Did you check the survey pins?" I asked. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "Look, buddy, we just dig where the check tells us to dig." "I'm not blaming you," I said, though I probably should have. "But you might want to keep that work order handy. You're going to need it for the deposition." I left him sweating in the dust and drove back home. I didn't want his apology. I wanted leverage. And I already had it. I just needed to twist it. The pump house is a small, unassuming shed near the South Creek. It's rusted tin and spider webs, the kind of building you walk past 1,000 times and never notice. But inside, it's the heart of the operation. A massive electric pump hums in there day and night, pulling crystal clear water from 300 feet down. I unlocked the padlock, my lock, on my door, and stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and iron. There was a manifold system on the wall. One large pipe went to my house in troughs. Another, painted a bright, optimistic blue, shot underground and headed straight for the Oak Ridge clubhouse. I stood there for a long moment, hand resting on the red shut-off valve. I thought about the fence my dad built. I thought about the way he'd run his hands along the cedar rails, checking for rot, proud of what he'd staked out. I thought about the sheer entitlement of strangers tearing it down because it didn't match their aesthetic. I gripped the wheel. It was stiff and used for years. I had to put my shoulder into it, gritting my teeth, until with a groan of protesting metal, it began to turn. Creak, turn, creak, turn. Then, a solid thud as the valve seated home. The hum in the pipe died instantly. The pressure gauge for the outgoing line dropped to 0. Just like that, the lifeline was cut. I didn't break anything. I didn't sabotage their property. I simply stopped sharing mine. The first day was quiet. Pools are big things. They hold a lot of water. It takes time for the chemicals to burn off, for the evaporation to start, for the stagnation to set in. I spent the day cleaning up the mess they'd made of my pasture, rest-hacking the wood they'd tossed aside. I saw a few joggers on the trail, the same trail they wanted a better view from. They stopped and stared at me, probably wondering why the crazy rancher was stacking firewood in July. I just waved. A big, friendly, howdy neighbor wave. By the afternoon of the second day, the panic started. I was sitting on my porch, boots up on the railing, watching the sunset bleed purple across the sky, when I saw the flashing lights of a pool maintenance truck over at the clubhouse. They were running around like ants when you kick the hill. I could see them checking the skimmers, banging on their own equipment, scratching their heads. They thought their pump had died. They had no idea the water simply wasn't there to pump. On the third day, Patricia Vance showed up. She didn't come to the door. She drove her white luxury SUV right up my gravel driveway, scattering my chickens, and parked about 3 inches from my bumper. She got out, and she was exactly as I remembered. Blonde bob sprayed into a helmet, oversized sunglasses, and a coral blazer that looked ridiculous against the backdrop of my dusty barn. "What have you done?" she demanded, marching up the steps. "No hello. No sorry about the fence. Just accusation." "Morning, Patricia," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "You look upset." "The clubhouse water is off," she snapped. "The pool levels are dropping. The showers are dry. The landscape sprinklers didn't run this morning. My maintenance crew says the supply line is dead." "Sounds like a terrible inconvenience," I said. "Turn it back on," she ordered, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Right now? That is community infrastructure." I stood up then. I'm a big guy, worked with livestock my whole life. I don't try to be intimidating, but when I stand up, people usually take a step back. Patricia held her ground, though. I'll give her that. She was brave in her ignorance. "Patricia," I said, voice low, "that pipe connects to a well on my land. A well my father drilled. A well I pay the electric bill for. For 10 years, you guys have been drinking from my cup for free because my dad was a nice guy. We have a prescriptive easement, she shouted, using a legal term I was pretty sure she learned on Google 5 minutes ago. We have rights based on historical usage. And I have a fence. I cut her off. Or I did. Until you sent a bulldozer onto my property to tear it down because it didn't match your throw pillows. She blinked, actually surprised. That was necessary maintenance. It was an eyesore. A blight. It was a boundary, I said. You destroyed the boundary. You broke the social contract, Patricia. You want to play by the strict letter of the law? Fine. Show me the contract where I agreed to give you water. Show me the deeded easement. Show me the utility payments. She opened her mouth, closed it, and flushed a deep, angry red. You are holding an entire community hostage over some old wood. I'm not holding anyone hostage, I said, sitting back down. I'm just conserving my resources. Aesthetics, you know? I decided the blue pipe didn't match the rustic vibe of my pump house. She stormed off, gravel flying as she peeled out. She thought she could bully me. She thought she could call the cops. And she did. A deputy came out about an hour later. Nice kid. I knew his dad. He looked at the well, looked at the property line, looked at the lack of any contract on file, and shrugged. It's a civil matter, ma'am, he told her right there in my driveway. He owns the well. If you don't have a contract, I can't force him to open the valve. That was the moment the reality hit her. You could see it in her shoulders. She wasn't the queen anymore. She was just a lady with a drying pool and a lot of angry neighbors. And oh, did the neighbors get angry. By day 4, the pool was turning. Without fresh water to cycle through the filters, the chlorine burned off in the hot sun. The water went from sparkling blue to a cloudy, milky white. And then, as the algae woke up and realized it was party time, it started to turn green. Not a nice forest green, but a sickly, neon, swamp thing green. The smell started on day 5. It was 90 degrees out. That stagnant water, sitting in the heart of their pristine neighborhood, started to cook. It smelled like rotten eggs and wet dog. I went into town for groceries and ran into Bill, a guy who lives in Oak Ridge. Decent guy, keeps to himself. He cornered me in the produce aisle. Jack, he said, looking tired. The pool is a swamp. My kids are crying because swim team is canceled. The clubhouse smells like a sewer. I heard, I said, picking out a melon. Patricia says you're being unreasonable, Bill said. She says you're trying to extort us. Bill, I turned to him. She bulldozed my fence. She trespassed. She destroyed property. And she expects me to keep giving her free gifts? If you borrow my lawnmower and then kick my dog, you don't get to borrow the mower again next week. Bill sighed, rubbing his face. She did what? She told the board it was on HOA land. She lied, I said. Go look at the survey markers. They're still there, right next to the tire tracks. Bill nodded slowly. I'll handle it. I didn't know what handle it meant, but I found out 2 days later. The buzzards showed up on day 6. Literally. A couple of turkey vultures started circling the clubhouse, probably attracted by the smell, or maybe some poor frog that had boiled in the green sludge. It was a poetic image, nature reclaiming the artificial paradise. That evening, a caravan came up my driveway. 3 cars. Patricia wasn't in the lead. Bill was. They got out, looking like a delegation sent to surrender a city. Patricia was in the back, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. No blazer today, just a t-shirt and a look of absolute defeat. I walked out to meet them, Ranger, my horse, trotting up to the fence line to watch the show. Jack, Bill said, extending a hand. We need to talk. I'm listening, I said. Bill pulled a folder out. We had an emergency board meeting last night. We reviewed the survey maps. We reviewed the contractor's logs. He glared back at Patricia. We know the fence was on your land. We know there was no authorization to cross that line. And we want the water back, Bill said. But we know we have to make it right. He handed me a document. This is a formal apology from the board. This, he handed me a check, is full reimbursement for the fence, plus labor, plus a nuisance fee for the intrusion. I looked at the check. It was a healthy number. Enough to build a fence that would last 100 years. And the water? I asked. We drafted a lease, Bill said. No more handshake. We pay a monthly utility rate for the water usage, retroactive to the beginning of this fiscal year. It's a 20-year contract. Guaranteed revenue for you. It was fair. It was more than fair. It was business. But I looked at Patricia. She was staring at her shoes, refusing to meet my eye. One more thing, I said. The board members tensed up. I want the fence rebuilt, I said. But I don't want to build it. I want you to hire the crew. I want it built to my specs. Cedar, split rail, rustic, the exact same style you tore down. And I want it done by the end of the month. Done, Bill said immediately. And I looked at Patricia. I want her to inspect it. When it's finished, I want Patricia to come out here, walk the line, and sign off that it meets aesthetic guidelines. Patricia's head snapped up. Her eyes narrowed. But she saw the faces of her board members. She saw the desperation. She smelled the swamp water wafting from the clubhouse. Fine, she whispered. I can't hear you, I said. Fine, she snapped. I'll do it. I smiled. Pleasure doing business with you. I walked to the pump house, the delegation trailing behind me like ducklings. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and grabbed the red valve. I gave it a hard turn. The water rushed into the pipe with a hiss and a roar, the pressure gauge jumping back to life. You're back in business, I said. It took them 2 weeks to drain and scrub that pool. They had to acid wash the concrete to get the green stain out. It cost them thousands. The whole time, the smell of bleach hung over the neighborhood, a sharp reminder of their little misadventure. But the fence is a thing of beauty. Bill hired a top-tier crew. They used premium rough-hewn cedar. It smells like a forest. It looks strong. It looks like it belongs there. The day they finished, Patricia came out. She walked the line, her heels sinking into the soft dirt. I walked on my side, Ranger nudging my shoulder. She stopped at the corner post, the exact spot where she'd staked that violation notice. She pulled a clipboard out. It appears to be structurally sound, she said stiffly. Does it meet the guidelines, Patricia? I asked. She took a deep breath, gritting her teeth so hard I could hear it. It is acceptable. I think it's beautiful, I said. It's the best view in the county. She signed the paper, shoved it at me, and marched back to her car. She resigned from the board a week later. Turns out, presiding over the great algae disaster of 2024 wasn't good for her re-election prospects. Things are quiet now. The water flows, the checks clear every month, and the fence stands tall. Sometimes, in the evening, I see Bill or other neighbors walking on the trail. They wave. I wave back. They look at the fence, not with disdain, but with a kind of respect. Because that fence isn't just wood and wire anymore. It's a monument. It's a reminder that good fences make good neighbors, but respect makes better ones. And it's a reminder that you never, ever tear down a wall until you know exactly why it was put up and who is holding the keys to the water supply on the other side. It's easy to get caught up in rules and regulations, to think that your little patch of authority extends to the horizon. But out here, the land remembers. The land has a way of balancing the scales. You can try to bulldoze your way through life, but eventually, you're going to get thirsty. And when you do, you better hope you haven't burned the bridge to the only well in town. So, look around your own life. Are there boundaries you're respecting? Or are you pushing where you shouldn't? Let me know in the comments what you would have done. Would you have turned the water back on? Or would you have let them swim in the swamp a little longer? Thanks for listening. Keep your fences strong and your powder dry. Catch you next time.